Welcome to the Answers for Elders radio show. Meet the trusted experts who will give you straight answers and will help guide you on the path of later life care. Now, here's your host, founder, caregiver, and CEO, Suzanne Newman.
And welcome everyone to Answers for Elders radio network, heard across the USA and on your favorite podcast channel. And we are here talking with the wonderful Dr. Shawn Weiss, and who has been an incredible expert. We talked a lot in the beginning of a lot of her podcasts about stress and stress management. Well, this is a series that is not to miss, because how many of us are out there caring for a loved one that may be cognitively impaired? And Dr. Weiss, Dr. Shawn, I'm so glad you're here, because that's a whole other scenario. And I think it's something that's stressful for family caregivers as well, on how do I communicate with my loved one? So tell me a bit about, how do you see that dynamic playing out?
Well, what I'm seeing happening is, just from the sheer fact that we have so many more people over 65, right? Just the numbers, right? I mean, in 2022, the census, there was over 58 million people over 65. And they're already saying that that's going to increase by 20% by 2040. Yeah. So it's natural to think and to understand that we're going to have more people that are diagnosed with cognitive impairment. The rate right now is 12 to 18% over 60 years old has some sort of mild cognitive disorder.
Wow, so that's high. Over 60?
Over 60 years old, 12 to 18% of us. So let's say us. I'm only 54. I'm not quite there yet, but that number keeps rising. So, and heck, assisted living communities and nursing facilities, that number is 80% now. 80% of all the residents in senior care communities have some sort of cognitive impairment. And that could be mild cognitive impairment all the way through all the many different types of dementias to Alzheimer's disease. But that's a staggering amount, 8 out of every 10 people that reside in those communities. And it makes sense. That's typically one of the reasons why they end up going there too. But most people, especially since COVID, they want to age in place, right? So what we're finding is, because of that, you're seeing a lot more people that are trying to stay home. You've seen a lot more people that might have people coming into the home. You're seeing family members assist their parents, maybe assist their grandparents, maybe grandma or grandpa moved in and they're having memory issues. So I think the majority of people are just feeling ill-equipped.
Well, and I think too, I know when I was caring for my mom, she had vascular dementia, but it was not severe that she didn't know me or anything, but she still got facts and information wrong, or, and I would try to correct her. Mom, no, that's not what happened. This is what happened. And my mother would look at me like, I'm the mother. And I was so grateful one day when we were in her care facility, and the nurse came up to me and she said, Suzanne, I'm going to give you some advice. She said, the truth at this point in time is irrelevant. Let your mother have her truth. And I thought, whoa,
what a powerful
it was
statement.
like this big aha moment that I wanted to be the good girl and make sure everything was done correctly or said correctly. And really it was way off track.
Well, you're not alone. That's a normal, natural reaction, right? And again, that goes to the power of education and providing knowledge, which is, one of the passions that I have for that population.
Yeah. And so obviously there's this disconnect between, the family members and that's cognitively impaired. But I want to back up, because I think one of the questions that I really want to ask you is, what actually is dementia?
Well, most people think that that's a diagnosis, and heck, even in the home health world that I live in, we still see doctor's orders that'll have, to see the patient because of the diagnosis is dementia. And it's actually not a diagnosis at all. Dementia is actually a group of symptoms.
Yeah.
It's a group of symptoms, and typically you have to have a loss of function in at least 2 categories to be diagnosed with one of the types of dementia. And there's over 100 types of dementia, believe it or not. There's the ones that we hear about, and there's some that I don't even know of, right? You know, you're always learning.
Ones that are getting more awareness, like frontotemporal dementia. We never used to talk about that. And when Bruce Willis was diagnosed, and now Wendy Williams, now people are starting to say, oh, that's
people
another
are starting to pay attention. Yeah. And that platform is going to bring a lot of education in. So, you know, typically you want to see, you know, you'll have two areas where you're seeing people really lose function. And that is, you know, with language deficits, communication, right? They're either maybe like a receptive aphasia where you have trouble understanding what somebody's telling you, or an expressive aphasia where you're just not finding the words, or you know, word finding issues. Judgment, maybe your safety judgment is not right, or you're just making decisions that mom's just making some decisions that she normally wouldn't have made. Right. That's definitely, you know, especially when we deal with fall prevention and fall risk, people taking unnecessary risk with that, and they start falling more. Also, you know, just your typical memory issues, that you can't keep explaining away, right?
True.
And that usually that's one of the first things that, you know, it starts much earlier than we realize, but you always have a reason. You always have an excuse as to why I didn't remember that, right?
Well, and I think what you're saying,
memory issues.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is that yes, there's different types of dementia, and we can talk about the different types. But I think a lot of us, we may forget what we went into a room to go find. That's not, that's a normal, you know, what I call it, space out, you know, all of a sudden, or, you know, a scotoma where you're looking for the salt and it's sitting right in front and you can't see it, right? And people will say, my husband will say to me, honey, it's right there. And I'll look at him like, well, my head is in a million other places. That doesn't mean I'm cognitively impaired, does it?
Right. No, it doesn't. I mean, there's some age-related memory things that we all go through, especially when we go through menopause, right? The whole brain fog thing is, you know, real. That is really real. But, you know, the confusion, the decreased concentration, and then also one of the big signs is personality, just subtle personality changes that are, you know, consistent, where you will notice that. And that's one of the early signs of that. But again, 100 forms of dementia. And, you know, we hear about Alzheimer's. That's, of course, the most common type of dementia is of Alzheimer's disease. And they actually are doing a lot of great work with the biomarkers of being able to pinpoint that a little bit more closely. And then vascular dementia, like you talked about, is the second most common. And vascular dementia, you'll see a lot when it was interruption of blood flow, hence the word vascular, right? Somebody that might have
my mom had COPD, so it's very common. She was a long-term smoker. That was what happened. And she had vascular issues in her legs. And she also had it affected, you know, and it was definitely vascular dementia.
Yeah, it's an interruption of blood flow. You know, strokes really cause that quite often. You'll see vascular dementia. Lewy body dementia is also, you're hearing a lot more about that. It's the third most common. Lewy body dementia, with my experience, and I have taken care of over the last 25 years, many people who have been diagnosed with that. That one is, you know, progresses a little bit more quickly. And, you know, what you find if you do have a Lewy body dementia diagnosis or dementia with Lewy bodies, you see it listed both ways. You really want to work with the families on making sure you're starting to look at safety. You're going to plan ahead because things are going to progress a little bit more quickly. So you want to make sure things are in place, that your plan A, your plan B, and your plan C are there. That's probably the most important thing, is keeping them safe. And then the, like I said, the frontotemporal dementia, and again, with Bruce Willis and Wendy Williams, you're right. Those are the ones that we're hearing about now. That one there's a lot of genetic components to frontotemporal dementia. There's not a known cause for it, but, you know, the frontal lobe and the temporal lobes of the brain, which also happens to be very close in proximity to the centers that control walking and balance. So you see a lot of gait and walking disorders in people with frontotemporal dementia. But you also have, Suzanne, you know, not just, you know, the 100 types of dementia, but you have, you know, not to forget about reversible dementias. And there's a category of reversible dementias.
Absolutely,
you know,
especially brain injuries that people can replace and get better.
Absolutely. And then you might have the very temporary dementias that are induced by, let's say, infection, right? Tumors,
Yeah.
side effects from medications is a big one. UTI, one of the first signs of a
Oh
UTI
my
is
goodness.
excessive
Absolutely.
confusion. And that's
I always
reversible.
knew my
Yeah,
mom would go
yeah.
off the rails when she was getting a UTI, always.
I mean, that's the first thing you look for, really,
Mhm.
is
Yeah.
that. Substance abuse certainly
Yeah.
causes an onset of dementia, as well as some sleep disorders. So there
Mhm.
are reversible kinds of cognitive impairment out there.
Mhm.
And then again, the ones we talked about initially is the ones that are progressive in nature. So
Yeah.
that it's going to progress. What can you do to preserve function, and what
Mhm.
can you do to do that? And so communication is the key. And I think people are looking for answers to, how do I help mom? How do I help grandma get through this, so that I'm making their quality of life the
Yeah.
best that it can be.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously in this whole realm of even there's different types, there's probably a commonality to how we communicate. Because what I learned, I think at the end of learning with my mom, I learned the hard way. Um, I learned not to correct her. I learned to give her choices rather than tell her this is what we're going to do. So
Mhm.
I had to learn to frame things in a certain way, or she was very she'd push back constantly
Mhm.
to me.
Yeah.
Um, and there was a lot of challenges that we had when she was in care because she didn't want to take a shower, which is common, and those types of things. And you just have to learn what's right. And I'm very
Just little
excited.
tweaks.
Yeah,
Mhm.
so I am excited to talk a little bit more about all of this in our next segment. And in the meantime, I know you have a special giveaway, do you not, on your website?
I do. You can go to seniorhealthandwellness.org, and you will see a thing at the top that says free guide. And that is the link to the communication strategies for cognitive impairment that you could get.
That is awesome.
Seniorhealthandwellness.org. Mhm.
Well, we want to make sure that we absolutely promote that, and we'll put that on Answers for Elders as well. So if you need to get that information as our listeners, please check it out. And Shawn and we will be right back right after this. We at Answers for Elders thank you for listening. Did you know that you can discover hundreds of podcasts in our library on senior care? So visit our website and discover our decision guides that will help you also navigate decision making. Find us at answersforelders.com.